leading Britain's conversation.
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? I don't want to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day. When you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I could applaud you for having a sense of humour. Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schultz, as well. I want you all fired.
Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. Well, good evening, everybody. In the last half an hour, the unelected House of Lords have, by 366 votes to 268 votes, voted against the government. Some indeed would argue against the British people, because they've said that once Article 50 is triggered, oh, and by the way, I'm here in Brussels, it was supposed to be triggered this week, and we managed to get through the courts, and we managed to get through the House of Commons, but it's the House of Lords that have meant we will not be triggering Article 50 this week. But when we finally do, at the end of a 2-year negotiation, the people in Westminster, those in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, will be able to veto it. Now, before I reach for the gin bottle in my anger, I think we need some sensible and sober analysis from LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood, who is down in the Palace of Westminster. Theo, was this result a shock?
No, it wasn't a shock, Nigel, but it was a heavy defeat for the government in the House of Lords. And as you say, under the plan put forward by noble peers, Theresa May's eventual deal in 2 years' time could be vetoed by Parliament. And in effect, they ruled out any notion that Theresa May could simply reject any deal and then just revert to World Trade Organization rules, because under their plan she has now to go back to Brussels if they turn down her deal. One of the main proponents of this change was the former Deputy Prime Minister, Conservative peer Lord Heseltine.
Everyone in this House knows that we now face the most momentous peacetime decision of our time. And this amendment, as the noble Lord has so clearly set out, secures in law the government's commitment, already made to another place, to ensure that Parliament is the ultimate custodian of our national sovereignty.
Now, Nigel, there were some noble peers who would agree with your point of view, notably Lord Forsyth, who said it was ridiculous that noble peers were trying to make this change because it, in effect, made them party to the negotiations.
So we get to the final hour at midnight when the deal has been done, and the Prime Minister says, hang on a second, I can't agree a deal, I've got to go and consult the House of Commons. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Now, it is a first rule of negotiation that you never negotiate with someone who doesn't have authority to conclude the deal. And the effect of these proposals is to put ministers in a position where their authority is in doubt.
Theo, one question. March the 9th, this Thursday, was the moment at which Theresa May was due to come to the European summit to meet 27 other heads of state to trigger Article 50. What happens now, and how long will it take, in your view?
Well, look, because of what happened last week with Theresa May being defeated on her plans not to secure the result of EU nationals before going to trigger Article 50 in Brussels, there was the delay. That's when the first lag kicked in. And of course, this will now go back to the House of Commons on Monday. And this vote tonight doesn't change that. So this will all be lumped in together when MPs reconvene on Monday and Tuesday to debate the changes. The danger for Theresa May on this is that it will embolden Conservative Europhiles, people like Anna Soubry, Nicky Morgan, Dominic Grieve, to actually vote against the government when it comes to overturning this amendment. That's what Labour peers are hoping for, because I have been speaking to a few of them in the last day or so, and they insist that if it comes back to the House of Commons, they won't overturn it. There was also Lord Lawson in the upper chamber as well this afternoon, and he was supporting Theresa May.
It is sad, but sadly, a bad agreement is all that is likely to be on offer. But the mischief, my lords, is that it would not merely give Parliament the power to reject a bad deal. It would also enable Parliament to prevent Brexit altogether by refusing to allow the UK to leave the European Union without an agreement.
Theo, thank you very much indeed. Well, before I tell you what I think, I'm asking you, is this level of interference by the House of Lords in the Brexit negotiations justifiable? And I'm not going to tell you just yet what I think. I'm just about barely in control, which may give you a clue. So I'm going to ask Cathy in Southampton what she thinks about this House of Lords vote this evening. Cathy, hello.
Oh, hello, Nigel. Very nice to talk to you. I just think it's getting more and more like a circus, to be honest. I'm very, very angry at this because, people, the majority of people voted to get out of this EU, which I thought would happen last year, and it's just going on and on and on and on. It's just crazy. It's just driving me mad, to be honest. I think
is this a willful attempt, Cathy?
Sorry?
Cathy, is this a willful attempt by career politicians, elected and unelected, to effectively overturn the referendum? Is that what's going on here, in your view?
I think it is, yes. I think, it's just a complete hold-up. They just want to hold everything up so that they can just have... I feel that they're just, looking for ways to stop Brexit completely. They seem to be achieving it so far.
What are we going to do, Cathy?
Well, that's what I'd like to ask you, actually, because you actually said once that it's not complicated to trigger Article 50. So why hasn't Theresa May just triggered it? This is what I want to know.
Well, because she delayed. Because, Cathy, she delayed. It should have been done immediately. She delayed. We were told they had to put in place negotiating teams. And then we had legal challenges in the High Court, the Supreme Court, and now we're going through that. We've been through the House of Commons and we're now in the House of Lords. It's the hesitancy of the Prime Minister that has led us, I'm afraid, directly to this mess. Although, Cathy, it's worth remembering that in the biggest decision, electoral decision of our lifetimes, of course, this Prime Minister was, of course, on the other side, wasn't she? She was Remain. Cathy, let's see. I get the feeling that if we continue in this vein, I think the anger of the British people on this subject will be unlike anything we have seen in our lifetimes. And I suspect, Cathy, that you're one of them.
I'm one of them, definitely, yes, because
You're one of them.
I'm getting angry. Every day I read the papers. Every day or every night I listen to you on LBC. It's a very interesting show, by the way. And, I'm just getting so angry that I just don't know where to go with it all.
I don't want to upset you, Cathy, but I'm trying to cheer you up. But right at the moment, I can offer you very, very little, and I thank you for your call. Your Facebook messages coming in, totally justifiable what the Lords did. Oh, right, Michael, how'd you work that out? An unelected bunch of weasels in Westminster could effectively try to overturn the biggest democratic exercise in the history of the nation. I don't buy it. Bruce says, well done the Lords for their common sense and integrity. How is it integrity to attempt to overturn the will of the British people and, Bruce, to completely destroy Theresa May's negotiating hand? These people here, and I'm in Brussels now, Mr. Juncker and all the rest of them, they now do not need to have a serious negotiation with the British because they know that their friends, the Quislings in Westminster, ultimately will be on their side. So there's no need for them to offer, frankly, anything. I think in terms of the renegotiation, it is a disaster. I wonder what Rick in Exeter makes of this. Rick, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Nigel. It's been a long time. Nice to speak to you again. The whole thing to me looks, and it's going to sound rather conspiratorial, but I'll give you some things that I think justify this in a moment. The whole thing looks to me to be a complete filibuster and obfuscation. The British people have spoken, and never has the liberal left wing been so vocal. It's almost hypocritical, the way that the Remain or the Ramon campaign has come out and been so vociferous and vocal and protesting against what's the situation that we have. I think that this battle now between the Lords and the Commons is driven probably by something a little bit more. I think not everything is coming to the surface. And the reason why I say that is that when we were first taken into the European Union by Edward Heath, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office issued a document called Foreign and Commonwealth Office Document 1048, which told the Heath government at the time that this would lead to the usurping of British sovereignty and to basically take away the power of Parliament.
But the people, Rick, weren't told that, were they? They were told it's a common market. Come on in, the water's lovely, it won't be a problem.
Exactly, and we're seeing the repeat again. What's being vied for here, Nigel, is a second referendum. It's as simple as that. We've seen it time and time again. We've seen it in Ireland, we've seen it in France, we've seen it in...
Denmark, twice in Ireland, actually. Yeah. Rick, let me ask, you clearly are a student of this. Let me ask you a question. I was very interested that William Hague, today in the Daily Telegraph, wrote a piece saying that what Theresa May will need to do is actually to go to Parliament to overturn the Fixed Term Parliaments Act and to have a general election this year to give herself the mandate to go out and do this negotiation with the European Union. Is Hague right? Are we getting very close to the point where Mrs May has to call a general election?
No, let's be absolutely clear what happened. Okay, the people were asked to vote on Article 50, on the issue of being in or out of Europe, and the people turned out en masse, huge numbers, got out of their seats, even the apathetic got out of their seats and went and voted. And despite the disparity in campaigning, despite the pro-EU stance and all of the rest...
Yeah, but Rick, the point is... Yeah, but Rick, hang on, Rick. Rick, the point is, what happens if this goes to the House of Commons next Tuesday or whenever it is, and actually, given that the Tory government's got a very wafer-thin majority, Mrs May loses this in the House of Commons next week. Does she then have to go for a general election?
I'm afraid it's a difficult one to answer. If she goes for a general election, essentially, that almost looks like it's essentially a referendum again by a different guise, isn't it? And if it goes the other way, then it will be okay. Well, then you'll need to have another referendum, which is the same old story. Just keep voting.
I tell you what, Rick. I don't see Mr Corbyn beating her if there's a general election in 6 or 8 weeks' time. Rick, I thank you for your comments and for your knowledge on this. Anne says on Facebook, how can an unelected Lords be able to do this? Well, actually, Anne, I think probably the time has come to get rid of them, to abolish them. They have served their purpose. Paul says on Facebook, Theresa May should have implemented Article 50 the day after the referendum. I blame all the dithering. I blame all the dithering too, Paul. I'm live here in Brussels. You can watch me on LBC's Facebook page now. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. The time now is 7:15.
This is LBC, live from Brussels, The Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
So the government suffers a defeat in the House of Lords, and after 2 years of negotiations in Brussels, the whole thing can now be vetoed by the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Is this level of interference from the unelected House of Lords justifiable? Well, I certainly don't think so. I think it is an outrage, yet another attempt to effectively stall and then overturn the referendum result. But whether you're outraged as I am, whether you think it's perhaps a good thing that we need protecting from ourselves because we're so stupid that we voted for Brexit, either way, get involved in this and call me on 0345 6060 973, text me on 84850, tweet at LBC, not forgetting the hashtag Farage and LBC, and you can watch us on LBC's Facebook page now. And I wonder what Rosalind in Hendon makes of tonight's vote. Rosalind, good evening.
Good evening. Nigel, in your statement, in these past few sentences that you've uttered, what do you think the single most important word is that you've stated?
I think the single biggest principle I've stated is about democracy. Democracy, Rosalind. That's what's going on. The unelected House of Lords, Rosalind.
Democracy involves the extremely important input of the House of Lords to make sure that the British citizens do not make a permanent error in the law giving of our country. This has been that way for centuries, and you have the audacity and the overstated confidence to try to destroy our country with demeaning the significance of the House of Lords?
Well, let me just tell you this, Rosalind. Rosalind, you might have been able to... You might be able...
Rosalind, yeah? Not Lynn.
Rosalind, you may be... Well, I can't help that. They misspell it, can I? Listen, you could have argued that up until 1999.
That as well?
You could have argued that. You could have argued that, because they were all hereditary, weren't they? When Blair came to power. Nearly all of them were hereditary. What happened was they were basically all swept out. At least the hereditaries represented the United Kingdom, because geographically they came from all over it. What we now have is a London-based group of party donors who gave money to Tony Blair and David Cameron, 750 life peers appointed by Blair and Cameron. They are not representative of the United Kingdom as a whole. They are part of the political class and the establishment, and I want to abolish them and replace them with an elected Senate. What is wrong with that?
The way that you want to destroy the United Kingdom with the whole concept of Brexit.
I don't really follow the logic of that. I want the United Kingdom to be independent.
No, that we are independent. You want independence, and the House of Lords has always been a part of the integrity and the independence of the United Kingdom, and you want to destroy them as well.
It's been destroyed by Tony Blair.
Are you connected with Trump and wanting the Soviet Union to try to destroy the United Kingdom? Where are you coming from? You cannot disparage the House of Lords.
Yes, you can, given that it's now stuffed full of party donors, placemen, people who, frankly, have been promoted simply for party loyalty. It does not have the expertise. It does not have the geographical spread that it used to have. And I will bet you that after this, the calls to abolish the House of Lords will become very loud and clear. Clearly, Rosalind, we're not going to agree, but there we are. That's life. I wonder what Charlie in Cardiff thinks.
Hi, Nigel. Good to get the chance to speak to you again. I am very struck by the irony of the situation. We've got an unelected chamber defending democracy and the sovereignty of Parliament, and we've got an elected chamber that's trying to deny democracy and not respect Parliament or give people a second say. I mean, I don't think it should end. I mean, I'm glad they've done what they've done, but I don't think it should end with Parliament, because the people got involved at the start. I think the final say must rest with the people.
Charlie, we've had our final say. We've had our final say.
Right.
We had a referendum in 75 where we were offered a completely, or my parents' generation, were offered a completely false and fraudulent prospectus. We were told it was simply about trade, not politics. We were upset with that, and it took us decades of campaigning to have another go. We had another go. We said we want to leave. Why, Charlie, should we be reduced to what happened to the Danes, what has happened twice to the Irish, where we're forced to vote again? At what point do the political establishment accept the will of the people?
Right, well, no, I just question you on one thing there. You were saying that it wasn't about a super state. Now, I've got in my hands a leaflet from a booklet that says why you should vote no, and it's a statement by the National Referendum Campaign, not by HM government. And it says the real aim of the market is, of course, to become one single country in which Britain would be reduced to a mere province. The plan is to have a common market parliament by 70.
But that was put out by a side. That was put out by a side that had no money, that couldn't market it. What was said by the leaders of the three political parties back in 1975 was crystal clear. And I don't think my parents are stupid. They're both alive still. They're not stupid. They thought they were voting for us to stay part of a common market. But look, you know, that's in the history, Charlie. That's in the history. But for now, I believe that it is an outrage to attempt to put this to a second referendum. Charlie, you have your view. I disagree. I wonder what Paul and Ealing makes of tonight's vote. Hello, Paul.
Hello. I mean, I'm a big fan normally. I voted for Brexit. I like you normally. I always check out your radio show. I'm not sure you're on it with this one. I'm completely up in the air with it. You know that the job of the House of Lords, whether you like them or not, is to hold the government to account, right? And I'm a fan of Brexit. I want Brexit. But why wouldn't you want Brexit to be scrutinised in absolute, complete depth?
Okay.
By a chamber who...
Paul, you're absolutely right. The job of the House of Lords is to scrutinise and hold the government to account and make them think again. You are absolutely right. However, Paul, the difference here is that this decision wasn't taken by the government. This decision wasn't taken by the House of Commons, or indeed the Lords. This decision was given to the British people and told to us in that government leaflet that went through every door in the land, this is your decision, and what you decide will be final. That, Paul, is my argument.
Absolutely agreed. But do you not? Do you trust the government? Do you trust Theresa May to do a perfect job with this?
What I trust Theresa May to do is to get us out of the European Union.
Well, if the answer is no, which I suspect it might be, that you might not trust Theresa May, then surely you want somebody holding her to account, which I don't believe that you've got faith that Jeremy Corbyn's going to do. I certainly don't think there's anybody in the House of Commons that are properly holding the government to account, that the government, that are properly make sure the government come out of Brexit, to come out of the European Union concisely, properly, with our best...
But Paul, even if we thought that somebody needed to have a say at the end of this negotiating process, the point I'm making, Paul, is that this urbanite, London-based House of Lords, stuffed with party donors and party hacks, is so unrepresentative of the country as a whole that they are, in my opinion, Paul, they are not fit to make this decision. I mean, would you like to see, Paul, this going to a second referendum ultimately?
Absolutely not, but... if legislation is drawn up by the government that's inadequate and is going to mean that we get stitched up when we finally do come to leave the European Union, then I want somebody to stop that before it starts. I want to come out. Of course I want to come out. That's why I voted for Brexit. I want to come out precisely, and I want to come out properly. And I'd like to think that the House of Lords, whether I elected them or whether I didn't, that's not something for me to say. And before Blair, I know that they were all hereditary, etc., etc., etc. But I'd like to think. I believe in justice in the same way that if you went to court, you wouldn't be in a position to be able to complain that the jury that were allocated to a case were experts or not. They are peers. They are our peers.
Paul,
you
Paul, I will guarantee you, Paul. I will guarantee you one thing: if this vote tonight is not overturned, we are frankly going to be whistling in the wind for the next 2 years. We will get nothing out of these Brussels negotiations because effectively we will see collusion between our political class and the Brussels political class. And Paul, we will not get what we voted for. That's what makes me angry. I thank you for the call and the debate. Text and tweets, you have another job, Nigel. Sort the Lords out. Ivor, well, I'm not sure I can do that on my own, but it was a slim majority. Are you blind or just willfully acting stupid? I accept that Brexit will happen, but let's not cut off our nose to spite our face, OK? Jim from Mitcham. Jim, that sounds like somebody that really doesn't want Brexit to be Brexit, which is what Lord Ashdown was saying before effectively the 7 o'clock news. Hi, Nigel. The House of Lords is making this country look like a bunch of idiots. Oh, how the EU must be laughing so much right now. I'm so angry, says Steph. So am I. And when I leave this studio, I'm going to be walking through the European Parliament and going up towards the Commission. And yes, you're right. This is a wonderful day for the European Union and for the unelected bureaucrats based here in Brussels. Victoria says on Facebook, people don't understand what parliamentary sovereignty is. The Lords are part of it. Victoria, I couldn't care less about parliamentary sovereignty. I care about the sovereignty of the people. That is why we had a referendum on this, rather than trusting our political class in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, who would never, ever, ever have voted to take us out of the European Union. We did it, and we were promised that our decision would be final. And we're going through months of wrangling, effectively, to try and dilute, delay, or even overturn the result of that referendum. And that, to me, is plain blooming wrong. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC, coming to you live from Brussels. It's 7:30, and time for the news with Rupert Bartier.
This is LBC, live from Brussels, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
So the House of Lords defeat the government and, in my view, the people of this country by saying that what we did in the referendum, by saying we want to get out, isn't good enough. And ultimately, Parliament will have a veto at the end of what may now prove to be a futile 2-year negotiation unless we get this changed. And as you may detect, I'm not particularly happy about this. But a bit of good news. I'm pleased. We have to build many more schools in this country. Why? Well, of course, you know the reason why. Our population is going through the roof. And the government are committed not just to building more schools, but they're committed to building grammar schools, to stopping the ban on new grammar schools being built. And Mrs May, the Prime Minister, has said it's her personal mission to create a grammar schools revolution. And I can actually hardly believe it, because for 20 years I've campaigned for more grammar schools in this country. I believe if you get grammar schools everywhere, including in the big cities, including in the poorer areas, they will be a fantastic tool to provide social mobility to help bright kids who come from poorer backgrounds. And I've been a bit of a voice in the wilderness, just me and UKIP, nobody else saying it. And I've done it again and again and again, and I've done it on LBC on Question Time and written about it in newspapers. And I thought perhaps once again I was going to be the patron saint of lost causes, and now the Prime Minister is starting a grammar school revolution, and I could not be happier. So there are some good things that have happened today. But returning to this vote that I think will ruin the government's attempt to get anything meaningful here in Brussels, and is yet a further delay to Article 50 being triggered. And by the way, it's now nearly 8 months since we voted in that referendum. And I think this level of interference from an unelected House of Lords against a free mandate in a referendum of the British people is plain wrong. That is my view. I wonder what Nick in King's Lynn thinks. Nick, good evening.
Well, I'm no great fan of the House of Lords. It's totally unelected. But it has been very useful, hasn't it, to the establishment over the years. I don't know whether you were working in the city at the time or at Dulwich College, but do you remember that time they overthrew the Ken Livingstone's cheap fare policies, 10p, which was a complete socialist revolution on bus travel? So they've all been very useful. But what my point is, Nigel, is what are you worried about? If the binding referendum based on that simple binary choice was right and conclusive, then surely you'll be able to overcome all those arguments. So that's the sovereignty of the people. Sovereignty of the people, yes, comes through voting, but voting is subject to discussion and debate, and that is something that referendum never had. And that is why all these arguments are now coming out.
But Nick, not veto. No, I mean, it couldn't have been clearer, Nick. I mean, for example, one thing could not have been clearer in the referendum. That was the use of this term, the single market. Every single leading participant on both the Leave and the Remain side said, if we vote to leave, we are leaving the single market. And what I'm seeing, Nick, is a willful attempt to keep us in the single market. How can that be right in a democracy?
Well, let's say you're picking on the House of Lords, former Prime Ministers like Major and Blair. It's not just these people who are beginning to shout now about it. It's all areas of big business who rely on the single market. And you go around saying, oh, right, we can just knock up these trade deals just like that. You can't knock up trade deals just like that. If it had been that simple, there would have been no need to go in the EU in the common market in the first place. It's
well,
a complete myth.
Actually, Nick, 50 years ago, we were living in a post-war world where actually tariffs were very, very high on manufactured goods, 40-50% on washing machines, things like that, all right? What has happened, and that was the argument for the common market, and in economic terms, it was a powerful argument, and it persuaded many people, all right? Since then, not because of But despite of the common market, single market, European Union, what has happened is we've been through an age of global trade liberalisation, where those barriers, particularly on manufactured goods, have come down to almost nothing. And Nick, there are countries out there, Nick, like South Korea, like Singapore, who have got trade deals with far bigger countries than we've got as part of the European Union. So the argument is actually many small countries out there have shown they can negotiate their own deals, and crucially, they can do it quickly. Surely if Singapore can do it, we can, Nick.
Yeah, but you've got to remember these areas out there in Singapore, they've got their own little trading blocks as well. The EU is the biggest massive trading bloc.
Wow.
In South America, Canada, places like this, they've all developed into where the idea of sovereign states is irrelevant. They have to cooperate between them.
No, it isn't, because Switzerland, Nick, Switzerland have trade deals with countries like Japan that we don't have, despite the fact we're part of this big bloc. Anyway, we mustn't get sidetracked on it. Nick, would you like to see a second referendum?
I'd like to see Parliament. I'd like to see Parliament debate this through about Article 50, and when the final conclusions have come up, I'd like a referendum on those issues, not just a simple binary choice where people like in Hartley, Poole and Boss can just munch over their Daily Express and think, oh, yes, no, yes, no.
Well,
they're actually told...
You are, Nick. Nick, you're in the Lib Dem position. I understand it. And by the way, there are 100 Lib Dems, 100 Lib Dem life peers in the House of Lords, 100 of them. Do you know how many UKIP have been appointed? 0, which tells me all I need to know about this House of Lords. Your texts and tweets coming in. It didn't say anything on the referendum voting slip about the Lords and Commons having the final say, says AJ. No, it didn't. Quite the opposite. We were told by the government our word would be final. Absolute shambles, Dean says. Shame on the Lords. Shooting themselves in the foot. I feel so angry. On Facebook, Paul says, it is definitely going to end in a second referendum. It's been leaning that way for some months as more and more people realise the mistake they've made. Nonsense, Paul. The last poll I saw showed 68% of people accepted the result, excuse me, of the referendum. Wanted the government to get on with it. What does Jackie in Southall think? Jackie in Southall, what do you make of this debate? I've lost Jackie. Is Matthew there?
Hello, Nigel. Yes.
What do you think?
Right. I'm probably a little more aligned with you and my thought process than a lot of people that have been calling in. I'm vastly concerned, really, with massive conflict of interest that there seems to be. I mean, a lot of the people that are sitting in the Lords, obviously, are being paid by the European Union. In terms of pensions and so on and so forth. We've got someone who was supposedly a barrister or some way involved with one of the legal challenges against Brexit, who then had a vote as well. My concern is, I mean, I think somebody else that called in earlier had referenced the idea of going into a court and sort of putting it before a jury as such. Well, that would never be allowed in this case because juries would be dismissed over conflicts of interest far less severe than the ones that we have with some of the people that are sat in the current House of Lords. How can it be that we allow these people to go against the will of the democratically expressed will of the people? I mean, I'm not particularly right wing, but I voted to leave. I'm 30. I'm not the old guard.
This is not right and left wing. In fact, the issue of whether we're an independent country has never been right or left wing, and in fact, it was the left predominant. Back in the 70s. But I would argue, Matthew, that actually this has gone to a jury already. The jury was every single one of us. It was the biggest, most eclectic and democratic jury in history. My fear, Matthew, is if this isn't overturned, we are not going to get the Brexit that we voted for. That's my fear.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely, and I would share that fear wholeheartedly. So I'm disappointed.
Yeah. No, well, you're disappointed, Matthew. There are many of us who are actually pretty blooming angry. I thank you. I thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Tony says on Facebook, Tony says, let's get rid of the unelected House of Lords. I voted out, and I don't need a bunch of oldies that take 300 quid a day for sleeping, overturning the referendum. Vanessa says, for those accusing the Lords of making money out of belonging to the EU, please explain how. Vanessa, I haven't said that, although... there are people in there, former European commissioners, who get a pension from the European Union, and it's a conditional pension. They only continue to receive the pension if they continue to promote the European Union. And Norman says on Facebook, a Lord's reform is what will come out of this, not fit for purpose anymore. Do you know what, Norman? I'll tell you what I think we should have. I'm warming to this theme. Let's have another referendum. I tell you what, OK, Paddy, Ashdown, all the others, let's have another referendum. Let's have a referendum this year on whether we should continue with this unelected House of Lords. I'd love to get involved in that. I'm live in Brussels here this evening. You can watch me on LBC's Facebook page. I hope you're enjoying this debate. I hope you're going to get engaged in the last quarter of an hour of this debate. But right now, it's 7:45.
The Nigel Farage Show, live from Brussels, only on LBC.
So their noble lordships decide they're going to vote against the British government, and I believe against the people, to give Parliament a veto over the next 2 years of Brexit negotiations. And I'm asking you, is this justifiable? Is it part of a big plan, effectively, to try and make us all vote again, because our political class don't like the result? But I've become a bit of a convert today. Something's changed today. I'm now in favour of a second referendum, but I want it to be on whether we continue to have this unelected House of Lords, because I've now decided, actually, just being stuffed full of party donors and placemen and mates of Blairs and Camerons, it has completely outlived its usefulness. That is how I feel. Now, we tried earlier, and we're going to go back to Jackie in Southall. Jackie, can you hear me?
Hello, Mr. Nigel Farage. Thank you for taking my call.
Okay.
When I, sorry, let me clear my throat. When I first encountered it, I wasn't really willing to give you the time of day, but you've become such a powerful man, and you have such a powerful voice. And this is why it's important for me to say, I want to ask you a question. Do you love 100% of this country or just 52%? Do you care about the opinions of 52%, or do you care about 100% of this country? Now, do you want us all to be happy and content and to listen to all our views, or just the 52%? Why not take the risk of letting the other nations who now have heard our voice loudly and clearly, and who are possibly, like us, panicking at what this is encounter means for all of us.
Jackie, it was a clear binary choice in this referendum, all right? And it was 52-48, and the reason it was 52-48 is because we had people like George Osborne telling us that our house prices would collapse, but it's now, Jackie, 68% in the last opinion poll want the government to get on with Brexit. You're right to make the point about everybody, but actually now a very clear majority want the government to get on with this. It's just the House of Lords, clearly, that don't. To Scotland, to Terence in Aberdeen, what do you think of the House of Lords' behaviour today, Terence?
Hey, Nigel. Second time speaking to you in 2 weeks. Basically, I just want to bring your attention to something that you may or may not be aware of. And, of course, I've been pondering, why did Theresa May choose the end of March, to try to trigger Article 50? Why could not she have done it sooner? And then I did some digging around, and, it kind of makes sense. Of course, you work in the European Parliament. What do you know about qualified majority voting?
There are some technical changes in the rules coming, and I understand that, Terence. I do understand that. The reason I think she originally proffered March is because she wanted time to get it through the Commons and the Lords. And having got it through the Commons, I think it would have been very difficult for her to have even contemplated that the House of Lords would have done this.
I mean, it's a very gutsy move by them, and of course, judging by the number of callers, on both sides of the divide with regards to the for and against argument, I do understand the displeasure. I mean, I'm on the side of, I'm very angry about what's happened. I just want this over and done with as soon as possible. But, listening to the other caller earlier this evening, the one of the conspiratorial, overtures, I do wonder, will this QMV, the qualified majority voting for those who are listening, will it kick in, for the Article 50? I mean, it's something I just could not find, really.
Ultimately, whatever the voting rules are in Brussels, the real point, Terence, is this. that we were due to have potentially quite a rocky ride for the next 2 years, certainly to begin with, to get these negotiations up and running. I think this vote in the House of Lords, unless overturned, makes the whole thing futile because, basically, the European Commission and their friends in the European Parliament will know that there's no need to give anything to the British because they've got the British Houses of Parliament now effectively on their side. And that's why the House of Commons needs rapidly to overturn this. And in my view, Terence, I do think that the Prime Minister now cannot discount having a general election this May. I think it now has become a real, genuine possibility. And I think there are many that would admire her if she did it. Terence, I thank you for your call. Your Facebook messages. Louise says, no more referendums, please. Gosh, yes, I do understand that. Rhiannon says, don't let the House of Lords make recommendations, and it's up to the House of Commons to make the final decision. Well, if this went ahead as it stood, it would go to the House of Commons at the end of 2 years and then to the House of Lords. Goodness me, maybe they could delay the whole thing by 20 years. I don't know. Your texts and tweets, Nigel, if we had a referendum on whether the House of Lords should be abolished and we voted to abolish it, they would vote to overturn the will of the people again, says Sean in Bicester. I'm sure they would. I wonder what Julian in Hornchurch makes of the great debate today. Julian, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. It's nice speaking to you. I agree with everything virtually you've said this evening, but I would just like to sort of say I'm interested in history, and the parallels of history are very clear to me, and I would just explain. To me, the referendum is like the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, when wages were being suppressed, or the people wanted more money because of the Black Death. There was a shortage, and they wanted their increase. They wanted to have more money. And the Lords didn't want this to happen. They wanted to keep their wages down. And this is the equivalent of having all this immigration. Our wages have been suppressed, and that's one reason why a lot of people have risen up and said, we've had enough of this. We want to run our own country, control our own borders. And we've had this revolt, if you like, a legal revolt this time. And what happens? The Lords, unelected, the same people that suppressed it in 1381, they're doing us down again. And in my view,
and of course, the hero, Julian, of all this was Wat Tyler, wasn't it? He was the leader, was he not, of the Peasants' Revolt?
He was. That's very true.
And didn't he come to a bad end?
Tony Blair, I believe that history, if you study history, it has lessons for you for today. And I think that's a big lesson. And what you were just saying, if Theresa May cannot get the Lords this overturned, I entirely agree with you. She should go for a general election, because
Julian, thank you. And no, I can't see any other way out of this. Unless you can get the House of Commons to act very decisively and the Lords to fall into line. Julian, thank you for your comparisons to 1381. I guess one thing that doesn't change very much is human nature and behaviour. I wonder what Karen in Surbiton thinks. Are you in favour, Karen, of what the House of Lords have done today?
Absolutely not. Now, I have to say, Nigel, I wasn't exactly a fan of yours to begin with, and it has taken Brexit to turn me into a fan of you, because you're talking common sense. And we had a vote. We had a referendum. And as you quite rightly say, it was a people's vote. The House of Lords doesn't have any right to veto at all. And I am thoroughly, as a Brexiter, I am thoroughly sick and tired of people smudging what the actual issues are. I personally, I'm a small business owner. My reason for voting to leave was because we're being strangled by all the rules and regulations of the EU. We spent tens and tens of thousands of pounds on CE certification for our product that, honestly, we don't need. We don't want to sell to the whole of Europe. Our product is very local. We want to sell it in the UK, but in order to do that,
Karen, of course,
we have to spend all this
Karen,
money.
that's why the big corporations, of course, support the European Union, because it's a great way of making life hellishly difficult for the little people as they see it, like you. I mean, I wonder whether the members of the House of Lords tonight actually understand just how angry millions of people are, because it sounds to me like you're one of them.
I think they're incredibly pompous. I think they're incredibly out of touch with real people. And I think if they actually realised that real people voted in the referendum, real people had the majority, and
did.
like any vote, the best you can do is ask for a recount.
Well,
but at the end of the day...
Karen, in the end, I promise you, we're going to get our way, and we've got one final, very quick caller. You haven't got long. Eric in Chicago, good evening. What do you think?
Hi, Nigel. It seems from an outsider's perspective that maybe a backroom deal was done with this House of Lords ruling. Like you said numerous times, the big corporations, the big multinationals, the big banks, they wanted Remain. They wanted you guys to stay. So it looks like they're going to make it as hard as possible for you guys. But don't you believe, with Le Pen ahead in the polls and Wilder looking as though, I would say he has a 5-1 chance, don't you think by this time next year the EU will be dead and the Fourth Reich will finally be wrapped up for good?
Well, Eric, I think the European Union is dying before our eyes, and I think I'm very pleased that we got off the thing before it finally blows apart. We've got elections coming up in the Netherlands next week, in France. Yes, it's finished. It's over. But those that have done well out of it and are part of big business in the establishment will go on defending it. Eric, I thank you for your call. We're at the end. My final thought simply is this. I can barely put into words my contempt for the political class in Britain. It's why I left business to get into politics. I didn't trust them then. I don't trust them now. And I would warn them, do not underestimate the anger of the people. We voted and we intend to see this through. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. And we're going to continue this conversation. The Lords has defeated the government on Brexit again. But are they right about the need for this meaningful vote on the final deal? What would that vote actually be? Is there a case for some kind of vote? Because Theresa May has actually promised some kind of vote at the end of the process on the deal. But what would that vote, what would the options be? How would it work? Also, later on...
Leading Britain's conversation.
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? I don't want to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day! When you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I could applaud you for having a sense of humour. Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schultz, as well. I want you all fired.
Nigel Farage.
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 The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. Well, good evening, everybody. In the last half an hour, the unelected House of Lords have, by 366 votes to 268 votes, voted against the government. Some indeed would argue against the British people, because they've said that once Article 50 is triggered, oh, and by the way, I'm here in Brussels, it was supposed to be triggered this week, and we managed to get through the courts, and we managed to get through the House of Commons, but it's the House of Lords that have meant we will not be triggering Article 50 this week. But when we finally do, at the end of a 2-year negotiation, the people in Westminster, those in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, will be able to veto it. Kathy, she delayed. It should have been done immediately. She delayed. We were told they had to put in place negotiating teams. And then we had legal challenges in the High Court, the Supreme Court, and now we're going through that. We've been through the House of Commons and we're now in the House of Lords. It's the hesitancy of the Prime Minister that has led us, I'm afraid, directly to this mess. Although, Kathy, it's worth remembering that in the biggest decision, electoral decision of our lifetimes, of course, this Prime Minister was, of course, on the other side, wasn't she? She was Remain. Kathy, let's see. I get the feeling that if we continue in this vein, I think the anger of the British people on this subject will be unlike anything we have seen in our lifetimes. And I suspect, Kathy, that you're one of them.
I'm one of them, definitely, yes, because
You're one of them.
I'm getting angry. Every day I read the papers. Every day or every night I listen to you on LBC. It's a very interesting show, by the way. And, I'm just getting so angry that I just don't know where to go with it all.
I don't want to upset you, Kathy, but I'm trying to cheer you up. But right at the moment, I can offer you very, very little, and I thank you for your call. Your Facebook messages coming in, totally justifiable what the Lords did. Oh, right, Michael, how'd you work that out? An unelected bunch of weasels in Westminster could effectively try to overturn the biggest democratic exercise in the history of the nation. I don't buy it. Bruce says, well done, the Lords, for their common sense and integrity. How is it integrity to attempt to overturn the will of the British people and, Bruce, to completely destroy Theresa May's negotiating hand? Now, before I reach for the gin bottle in my anger, I think we need some sensible and sober analysis from LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood, who is down in the Palace of Westminster. Theo, was this result a shock?
No, it wasn't a shock, Nigel, but it was a heavy defeat for the government in the House of Lords. And as you say, under the plan put forward by noble peers, Theresa May's eventual deal in 2 years' time could be vetoed by Parliament. And in effect, they ruled out any notion that Theresa May could simply reject any deal and then just revert to World Trade Organization rules, because under their plan she has now to go back to Brussels if they turn down her deal. One of the main proponents of this change was the former Deputy Prime Minister, Conservative peer Lord Heseltine.
Everyone in this House knows that we now face the most momentous peacetime decision of our time. And this amendment, as the noble Lord has so clearly set out, secures in law the government's commitment, already made to another place, to ensure that Parliament is the ultimate custodian of our national sovereignty.
Now, Nigel, there were some noble peers who would agree with your point of view, notably Lord Forsyth, who said it was ridiculous that noble peers were trying to make this change because it, in effect, made them party to the negotiations.
So we get to the final hour at midnight when the deal has been done, and the Prime Minister says, hang on a second, I can't agree a deal, I've got to go and consult the House of Commons. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Now, it is a first rule of negotiation that you never negotiate with someone who doesn't have authority to conclude the deal. And the effect of these proposals is to put ministers in a position where their authority is in doubt.
Theo, one question. March the 9th, this Thursday, was the moment at which Theresa May was due to come to the European summit to meet 27 other heads of state to trigger Article 50. What happens now, and how long will it take, in your view?
Well, look, because of what happened last week with Theresa May being defeated on her plans not to secure the result of EU nationals before going to trigger Article 50 in Brussels, there was the delay. That's when the first lag kicked in. And of course, this will now go back to the House of Commons on Monday. And this vote tonight doesn't change that. So this will all be lumped in together when MPs reconvene on Monday and Tuesday to debate the changes. The danger for Theresa May on this is that it will embolden Conservative Europhiles, people like Anna Soubry, Nicky Morgan, Dominic Grieve, to actually vote against the government when it comes to overturning this amendment. That's what Labour peers are hoping for, because I have been speaking to a few of them in the last day or so, and they insist that if it comes back to the House of Commons, they won't overturn it. There was also Lord Lawson in the upper chamber as well this afternoon, and he was supporting Theresa May.
It is sad, but sadly, a bad agreement is all that is likely to be on offer. But the mischief, my lords, is that it would not merely give Parliament the power to reject a bad deal. It would also enable Parliament to prevent Brexit altogether by refusing to allow the UK to leave the European Union without an agreement.
Theo, thank you very much indeed. Well, before I tell you what I think, I'm asking you, is this level of interference by the House of Lords in the Brexit negotiations justifiable? And I'm not going to tell you just yet what I think. I'm just about barely in control, which may give you a clue. So I'm going to ask Kathy in Southampton what she thinks about this House of Lords vote this evening. Kathy, hello.
Oh, hello, Nigel. Yeah, very nice to talk to you. I just think it's getting more and more like a circus, to be honest. You know, I'm very, very angry at this because, you know, people, the majority of people voted to get out of this EU, which I thought would happen last year, and it's just going on and on and on and on. Like it's just crazy. It's just driving me mad, to be honest. You know, I think
is this a willful attempt, Kathy?
Sorry?
Kathy, is this a willful attempt by career politicians, elected and unelected, to effectively overturn the referendum? Is that what's going on here, in your view?
I think it is, yes. I think, you know, it's just a complete hold-up. You know, they just want to hold everything up so that they can just have... I feel that they're just, you know, looking for ways to stop Brexit completely. You know, they seem to be achieving it so far.
What are we going to do, Kathy?
Well, that's what I'd like to ask you, actually, because you actually said once that it's not complicated to trigger Article 50. So why hasn't Theresa May just triggered it? This is what I want to know.
Well, because she delayed, because